The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub. Today we'll discuss another thriller story based on true story. A little Illinois hamlet outside of Chicago is where Kendra Hatcher was born. She showed signs of nurturing and caring from an early age. Her parents taught her the value of changing the world and assisting others. Kendra became passionate about dentistry in college and chose to specialize in pediatrics. She was a perfect candidate for a pediatric dentist because of her ability to relate to young people. Working with kids and assisting them in enhancing their oral health drew her in. In the age of 35, Kendra secured her ideal position in 2015 in a low-income dental office in Dallas, Texas. This dental clinic was committed to providing the best care possible to the local population and engaging with the community. Kendra had a strong desire to help and built a relationship with her patients right away. As an eligible bachelorette, it was no surprise that Kendra immediately won over dermatology resident Dr. Ricky Paniagua. Originally from California, Ricky fell deeply in love with Kendra, and she felt the same way. Their bond was so deep after just 4 months of dating that they started talking about getting married and moving in together. Kendra's loved ones were ecstatic for her. It had been a while since they'd seen her this enthusiastic. Since moving to Dallas at the beginning of the year, Kendra's life seemed to be going well. Kendra and Ricky had organized a romantic beach vacation to Cancun in September. But this was never going to happen. Kendra had no idea that her joy would not last long. Kendra was driving home on September 2, 2015, after working as a receptionist at a nearby hospital. On the way, she was texting Ricky, who was waiting at her flat, to discuss something. They were talking excitedly about their trip to Cancun, which was planned for the next day. Ricky asked Kendra to notify him when she got home and said he was going out to get something to eat. At about the same moment, Hashim, a young man who lived in the same apartment building as Kendra, was walking with a buddy to his car in the garage. He heard a disturbance that reverberated throughout the floor as they got closer to the parking lot. The loud screams and a string of pop sounds that sounded like gunshots caused Hashim and his friend to pause for a second. Hashim and his companion were startled as a black Jeep Cherokee screamed past them. Terrified, Hashim and his companion climbed into their vehicle and trailed the Jeep as it left the parking garage. Hashim saw a body on the ground beside a white Toyota Camry as they were leaving the garage. As soon as Hashim reached the street, he stopped, dialed 911, and reported that he had seen a woman on the ground with blood oozing from her neck. When paramedics and police arrived on the scene, the woman was already dead. Officers conducted a thorough search of the area before determining that the victim's car belonged to Dr. Kendra Hatcher. To verify the victim's identification, officers took a picture of Kendra's driver's license out of the database. The officers determined that Kendra was the victim because of the unmistakable likeness. Ricky, who had been contacting and messaging Kendra non-stop without getting a response, quickly became alarmed when the parking area was named the crime scene. He was approached by one of the homicide detectives. Ricky introduced himself as the boyfriend of Kendra. At that point, the investigator told Ricky that Kendra had died. At first, the detective thought Ricky's response was sincere. But since he was Kendra's boyfriend and was there when the crime was committed, he was forced to look into it more and find out how he was involved. After being arrested, Ricky was escorted to the local police station to be questioned. In the meantime, a group of crime scene detectives showed up in the parking garage to start looking through the body and collecting evidence. As soon as they got there, they saw that Kendra had been shot through the top of the back of her head and her chin. Furthermore, The fact that Kendra's hands had gunshot residue on them raised the probability that she was holding her hands behind her head when the incident occurred. The detectives concluded that the person who shot Kendra was standing over her when they carried out her execution based on the evidence they discovered at the murder scene. A shell casing from a .40 caliber weapon was also discovered by investigators. Investigators discovered a pistol magazine at the crime site. This finding made the detectives think that the magazine may have popped out because the shooter may have pressed the gun's release in a hurry. Upon closer inspection, no prints or DNA that may be used to identify a suspect were discovered in the magazine. One item stood out among the many important clues found at the crime scene. There was no sign of Kendra's purse. Because of this absence, investigators thought that a heist gone bad might have been the driving force behind her murder. The police asked the managers of the apartment complex for access to the security camera video that was installed in several parking garage locations. The investigators examined Ricky at the police station while they awaited the assessment of the CCTV tape. Ricky looked surprised and confused during the interview. The detectives were unable to throw Ricky out as a suspect even though there was no proof linking him to Kendra's shooting. But after the interview, police decided they didn't have enough evidence to charge Ricky, so they let him go. The detectives were presented with a sequence of terrifying incidents when the garage security camera footage was received. According to the video, a black Jeep Cherokee followed a resident through the parking garage at 7:15 p.m. on September 2nd and parked there. A white Toyota Camry pulled into the garage at 7:42 p.m., about 20 minutes later. The suspect exited the Jeep and moved out of frame, moving toward Kendra's vehicle as she pulled into her assigned parking space. The suspect re-entered the car on the passenger side as the Jeep suddenly reversed. The Jeep then bolted from the garage. The cops were unable to identify the shooter's characteristics or the Jeep's license plate number because of the shaky video. But when the security camera footage was reviewed, one important detail was discovered. One of the cameras captured the female Jeep driver leaving the parking garage. A still photo of the woman's face was taken by one of the detectives and made public. An image of the black Jeep Cherokee was included with this one. Jose Ortiz called the police 2 days after Kendra passed away and requested to talk to the detectives investigating the case. Jose consented to go to the police station and meet with the detectives. Jose told the cops that he owned the Jeep that was featured on the news during their encounter. He was certain that it was his automobile since he could identify its distinctive features, like the bumper trim and personalized rims. Jose, nevertheless, denied any role in the crime. He said that he had lent his Jeep to his buddy Brenda Delgado on September 2nd and that he was eager to get his reputation cleared. Jose asserted that since he and Brenda had been at Chili's for supper at the time of Kendra's death, Brenda could not have been the driver of the car. After confronting Brenda about his Jeep, which he had allowed her to drive, being shown on the news and implicated in a crime, Jose disclosed that she had threatened him. Brenda had warned him that if he didn't involve the police, they could have to inquire about his immigration status. In addition, the Jeep didn't match the vehicle the police were searching for because Brenda had offered to pay to have it painted. The detectives were intrigued by this discovery and grew more certain that Brenda might know something important regarding Kendra's death. In order to find out more about Brenda Delgado, the investigators called her on September 4th and invited her to come to the police department for an interview. They learned from this search that Brenda had moved to Dallas from Mexico when she was a young child. Brenda was quiet and shy, according to many who knew her, but they always sensed a positive vibe about her. Brenda was 33 years old at the time of the murder and was assiduously pursuing her dental hygienist certification. She was highly regarded by her dental hygienist school lecturers, who commended her passion and desire. They thought she had a bright future in the field and a lot of potential. Brenda denied knowing Kendra's identity when questioned if she knew the victim. She also stated that she and her boyfriend Jose went to Chili's restaurant on the evening of September 2nd. Brenda provided the cops with a Chili's receipt as evidence of her location that evening in order to bolster her alibi. Nonetheless, Brenda's story raised several red flags for the police. Brenda's possession of the receipt from the sparked suspicions. They thought it was strange that someone would have such an old receipt on hand. Brenda asked why her name had come up as a possible suspect. Jose Ortiz came forward and told the cops that Brenda had borrowed his Jeep. But Brenda claims that it was her friend Crystal Cortez, not her, who had borrowed the Jeep. She gave the detective Crystal's number and recommended that they give her a call for an interview. Brenda Delgado was interviewed in one interrogation room during the investigation, while Crystal Cortez was interviewed in another. On the day and time of Kendra's murder, Crystal acknowledged operating the black Jeep Cherokee that was captured on CCTV. According to her, a man abruptly leaped into the back seat of the Jeep as she and her kid were driving to the park. The man produced a gun and aimed it straight at her head, Crystal remembered. She pleaded with the man not to hurt her, and her child, terrified, but her requests were ignored. Crystal was threatened if she did not comply with the man's command to drive. Even though she was still holding the gun to her head, Crystal grudgingly obeyed the man's commands. A little after 7 p.m., they headed to the apartment parking garage, where Crystal got in by tailgating a resident's vehicle. She then parked and bided her time. At that moment, a white automobile passed past, and the man got out. Crystal thought the man had shot someone when she heard gunshots. When he came back, the man urged her to go. In compliance, Crystal drove the man to a location in downtown Dallas, dropped him off, and left her and her son alone. Apparently, on the morning of the murder, Crystal was seen on camera pulling the Jeep into the parking garage. Her claim was contradicted by the fact that her son was clearly not with her. Persuaded that Crystal's story was untrue, the police asked her for more information. The investigators questioned Crystal's assertion that she was coerced into driving to the apartment complex at gunpoint as the interview went on. They questioned her about why she didn't try to flee or get assistance throughout the encounter. It was evident from the CCTV tape that Crystal had waited for the suspect to get back into the Jeep before departing. The actual nature of the incident was questioned in light of this evidence. As the evidence grew and the investigators continued to question her, Crystal finally admitted to the planned attack on Kendra. She maintained, nonetheless, that she was unaware that the man with her was armed. She asserted that they had not meant to hurt Kendra, merely to rob her. Crystal said that Kendra refused to give up her bag, which resulted in a fight and the man shooting her. According to Crystal, the man returned to the Jeep after the shooting and threatened to kill her if she informed anybody about it. Crystal said the idea originated with her friend Brenda Delgado. In an effort to learn more about the relationship between Brenda and Kendra, the police questioned Crystal. She revealed that she thought Brenda and Kendra had the same man in mind. The nature of their relationship and if it was connected to the murder were intriguing concerns that were brought up by this discovery. The detectives found out throughout the inquiry that Ricky had been seeing Brenda Delgado for 2.5 years. In June 2014, the pair called it quits. By December of the same year, they had made up their minds to try again. They ended their relationship permanently in February 2015. Therefore, this attempt was short-lived. Ricky encountered Brenda again a few weeks after they split up, and he fell in love with her right away. He acted swiftly, adding Kendra and himself to his Facebook profile photo. Brenda was alarmed by this abrupt shift and felt intimidated by the new relationship. Crystal claimed that Brenda had come up to her and offered to rob her. Crystal claims that Brenda said she wanted to take Kendra's purse and offered to give her $500 if she helped. But Crystal said that the goal was always to rob Kendra rather than kill her. Suspicious about Crystal's assertions, the detectives chose to question Brenda in a different room. They told Brenda that they had learned that she had dated Kendra's boyfriend, which Brenda denied knowing about. Brenda insisted she was not involved in Kendra's death despite their suspicions. The police checked Brenda's and Crystal's cell phones extensively with the woman's permission. They learned that the day Kendra was killed, the two had gone to lunch together. They also noticed that Brenda had given Crystal the $500 in cash that was promised. A picture on Crystal's phone that was taken after the payment was made was discovered through additional inquiry. In this picture, Crystal is seen holding the cash in a heart shape. The fact that Crystal didn't appear agitated or afraid bothered the cops. Rather, she seemed to take pleasure in the circumstance. After returning to Crystal's interrogation room, the investigators asked her questions regarding the selfie they had discovered on her phone. They questioned why, despite her earlier claims that she was deeply troubled by Kendra's passing, she seemed so content and carefree. As they probed deeper, the investigators asked Crystal who the man who shot Kendra was. Crystal reluctantly admitted that she thought Lamar was the shooter's name. She stated that a month prior, she had met Lamar in a pub in downtown Dallas. Crystal claims that Lamar was a driver of a blue Chrysler Sebring. But the police were still skeptical of Crystal's honesty about who the shooter was. They thought Crystal might have provided a fictitious name in order to shield the true offender. They therefore made the decision to get in touch with Lamar and get his phone number in order to look into Crystal's claim in more detail. The police quickly supplied Lamar's phone number to the investigative team after receiving it from Crystal. Crystal confessed to getting paid by Brenda to be a getaway driver during her interrogation, which led to her imprisonment. But there wasn't enough evidence for the cops to arrest Brenda for murder. The investigators arrested Brenda for her unpaid traffic tickets and placed her under detention while they decided how to proceed with their investigation. Eager to track down the culprit, the detectives started looking through their criminal records database for a man named Lamar. They were disappointed to discover, though, that there was no evidence linking Lamar to the crime. The investigative team was determined to find the shooter's real name, so they turned to the FBI for possible help. They helped the cops locate the phone number Crystal had provided, which they said belonged to the shooter. A blue Chrysler Sebring was parked in the driveway when the officers conducted surveillance on the residence associated with the phone number. The car Crystal stated the shooter owned fit this description. A man was seen leaving the house on September 30th, over a month after Kendra was killed. He exited the driveway and climbed into the Chrysler Sebring. The FBI spoke with the driver directly after the officers followed the vehicle to a nearby parking lot. Christopher Love, age 31, was recognized by FBI agents as the driver of the blue Sebring. Christopher's car was taken to the auto impound lot for processing after he was taken into custody. The .40 caliber gun that was used to shoot and kill Kendra was found by the crime scene detectives when they searched Christopher's vehicle. The detectives hurried to the firearm lab to perform a test fire test after making this discovery. The test findings within an hour verified that the shell casing discovered at the crime scene did, in fact, match Christopher's firearm. This discovery had important ramifications because it immediately connected Christopher to the shooting. Christopher was taken to the police station, where investigators were waiting to question him, while the evidence against him grew. When Christopher arrived, he was met with the image of the firearm discovered in his vehicle. Christopher surprised the police by acknowledging that he owned the gun but denied that he was the one who shot Kendra. At first, Christopher said that Crystal was the one who shot Kendra to death. But based on the CCTV evidence, the detectives found that Crystal had been operating the Jeep when Kendra died. After more research, it was discovered that Brenda, another suspect, had promised Christopher narcotics as payment for helping to commit the crime. According to Christopher, Brenda informed him that Kendra had a link to a drug cartel and had stolen drugs from her home. But when the police approached her, they discovered that Kendra was a well-liked pediatric dentist with no drug links. Christopher was charged with capital murder and taken to the Dallas County Jail in light of the new information. Brenda, however, was first placed under arrest. She was eventually released from detention on September 5th after paying the payment for her parking violation. Brenda immediately started to leave the nation after being freed from detention. In an attempt to avoid being apprehended, she got on a bus and traveled to the Mexican border. Nonetheless, the authorities acted quickly and were watchful in their hunt for Brenda. Brenda was wanted for capital murder, therefore the investigators alerted the public and the media. Brenda was asked to give herself in. Regretfully, Brenda was not going to answer these calls. She chose to enter Mexico instead, where she spent months in hiding. To find her and apprehend her, local Mexican officials, the FBI, and the Dallas Police Department worked together. Numerous tools and tactics were used in the thorough search for Brenda. Detectives performed extensive background investigations, spoke with possible witnesses, and went through security footage. 7 months later, in April 2016, their unrelenting efforts paid off when Brenda was eventually found in Mexico. The issue for the authorities was to extradite Brenda to the United States while she was in custody. But there was one important need that had to be fulfilled. The U.S. had to pledge not to pursue the death penalty against her. Following discussions, the United States accepted the terms that Mexico had proposed. Brenda was consequently extradited to the United States to face a capital murder prosecution. Crystal Cortez's plea agreement with the prosecution strengthened the case against Brenda. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she agreed to testify against Brenda. Crystal was given a sentence of 35 years in jail after acknowledging her role in the murder. Crystal testified at Brenda's trial in 2019 that she and Christopher Love had sneaked into the parking garage of Kendra's apartment complex and waited for Kendra in September 2015 while Brenda was having dinner with Jose at Chili's for an alibi. Crystal testified that Christopher got out of the car, shot Kendra, stole her pocketbook, and went back to the Jeep where Crystal was waiting when Kendra drove by in her white Toyota Camry. Crystal's evidence was disputed by Brenda's defense lawyer, who said that Brenda did not fit her personality because she was the brains behind a murder for hire. According to the defense, after hearing Brenda disparage Kendra, Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love decided to rob and murder her because they believed Brenda would be the easiest person to blame. Following discussions, the jury convicted Brenda of capital murder. Brenda was given a life sentence without the possibility of release. Christopher Love was also convicted of capital murder and given the death penalty on October 31, 2018.